Happy Easter, brother. So, welcome to Crater Mania. And I'm your host, as always, the man they call Crater. And happy Easter, everyone, or happy Easter, as I started this program. Because not only is it Easter, but today is also WrestleMania Night 2. So, and I'll talk a little bit towards the end of this stream about a little bit about night one, but not too much because if you want to catch like a full review of night one, just go over to Dead Pit Radio's channel and the little group that we have together called the WrestleManiacs. We did a post show reaction last night of night one, and then tonight we're going to be doing a post show reaction of night two. So yeah, last night was pretty fun. I enjoyed last night, but I think tonight is going to be even more special. There's a lot more highly anticipated matches that's happening tonight on WrestleMania. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, like I said, today is Easter, and and as well as WrestleMania weekend. So, I wanted to kind of do a little collaboration here, of watching some Easter themed movies and also some wrestling movies for my 500 movies in 2025 series. And so I'm going to be talking about 8 movies on today's stream, and I'm going to keep it brief because I got some pre-show activities planned for WrestleMania here in a little bit. So I got to get ready for all that and to watch the big show tonight. Um, but I just thought that I would do something a little bit different, for this show, and just kind of talk about all these movies briefly. And then maybe somewhere down the line, on the channel, I may watch a couple of these movies again and just kind of give a more of a lengthy review for those movies. Um, so I'm just going to go ahead and not bullshit around and just jump right into these movies. So going to be starting off with the Easter portion of movies for this show. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention this. This would be number 167 through 174 for the 500 movies in 2025. Um, and Easter, I think, is probably my wife Candace's one of her favorite holidays. She always goes all out with with the kids and everything. The Easter egg hunts, the Easter baskets, everything like that. But there is, we are also very religious people, and there's more to the holiday than just chocolate rabbits and Easter eggs and all that, because that's just a whole thing that was kind of made up, decades ago, I guess, for just the holiday, when it's not really the true meaning behind the holiday. But yeah, like so that is it is one of her favorite holidays though, and like I said, for the whole that whole aspect of it, she loves doing that stuff for the kids, and always it's always good to to see them happy and enjoying it and everything too. Um, but just wanted to get that a little bit of the sappy stuff out of the way. Let's get into some of these movies. So this first movie, this is one that I had not seen till probably about 10 years ago or something. But this, I'm a huge fan of the whole Rankin Bass Productions. That did the stop motion animation holiday films from like the 60s and 70s and so forth. Um, and this was one that just kind of flew under the radar with me for so long. And I think it was Candace, my wife Candace, actually introduced me to this one in particular. Um, and I don't know how I missed it because I'm such a fan of Vincent Price. Um, you know, he does one of the voices, one of the main characters' voices in this film that I'm about to talk about. So yeah, just like wow, just really shocked that I went so long, especially growing up with watching these Rankin Bass movies, like Santa Claus is Coming to Town and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and all those Christmas stop motion um, movies from Rankin Bass. But this one's actually a really fun one because I mean it is based around Easter, but it also covers all the other holidays in the film as well, which is really cool. And it's got just a really cool voice cast as well. Casey Kasem and Vincent Price, and among others. And I don't think I've even mentioned the title yet. So this is Here Comes Peter Cottontail from 1971. Um, so, like I said, these Rankin Bass production films, they uh, they always have this kind of heartwarming message to all the specials that they put together, and just all the characters and the story and the music in these little short films are just really crafted with this just incredible detail. Um, Let me tell you, Here Comes Peter Cottontail, I think absolutely delivers in that whole Rankin Bass, magic that's kind of, you know, sprinkled a little bit with that dash of Vincent Price, you know, uniqueness that he brings to the table. And I really think that this is a special that really makes it a true Easter treat, especially for kids and just for people that, that love those kind of stop motion that grew up with them. Um, so if you're unfamiliar with this film like I was till about 10 years ago, it's it's a classic stop motion, animated Easter special that's, brought to us by the legendary Rankin Bass Productions. Um, it's a vibrant, just very musical adventure that's, I think perfect for the whole family. And it's kind of steeped in that kind of whimsical, um, gentle humor that that are hallmarks of those those beloved uh, holiday specials. It's just it's Easter personified, in just this very delightful, just handcrafted, animation, and I think it's great. I absolutely think it's great. Um, so, like I said, the duo behind this special and all these other specials that were put out during that time, is Arthur Rankin Jr. and Jules Bass. They were the founders of the Rankin Bass Productions. And these guys they're really they're titans of the whole stop motion, procedure, that goes into those types of films that kind of like inspired many other stop motion films like Nightmare Before Christmas, James and the Giant Peach, stuff like that for years to come. Coraline, and I think they were a big inspiration for Tim Burton in general. And uh, they're just they're really synonymous with that whole style of filming. And um but those guys that they're I think most famously known for the Christmas holiday specials that came out, like Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and Frosty the Snowman, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, all that stuff, Little Drummer Boy. Um and for me as a kid and my family, those were like annual traditions for us, and a lot of other people that I knew, the kids I grew up, that their families were the same way. Um, and just that whole, it's very unique. Definitely was unique at the time when these films came out. That whole stop motion style, because you just couple that with all these kind of catchy musical numbers that are, and the heartwarming stories, and it really they cemented their legacy, I think, as as masters of holiday entertainment. Um, Now let's go ahead and dive into the movie that we're talking about in particular today, which is Here Comes Peter Cottontail. So the story, focuses around Peter Cottontail, who's this kind of young, energetic and perhaps kind of overconfident, rabbit who dreams of becoming the next chief Easter Bunny. Um, he's a very talented egg uh, decorator. Just full of kind of bounce and bravado, and um, he's just ready to prove himself to the current chief, who is what is his name? Like Colonel Wellington something. I forget. But anyway, unfortunately, so Peter is he has this very eager enthusiasm about him. He and that gets the better of him. Um, and he kind of makes this really boastful mistake that sets off this chain of like events that's very comical and chaotic at the same time. Um, so then enter the villain here. Oh, and by the way, Casey Kasem is the voice of Peter Cottontail in this. But so enter our villain now, who is Irontail, voiced by the magnificent Vincent Price. Um, and Irontail is this very, disgruntled and kind of vengeful bunny who was previously denied the chief Easter Bunny title just due to this this childhood accident, involving these children and eggs. And they don't really go into that, so they leave that a mystery to your own imagination, I guess. Uh, But Irontail, who's like I said, he's voiced by none other than Vincent Price. He is determined to sabotage Easter and take over the holiday himself. And so he hatches this plan, involving clocks and just delayed springs to ensure that he wins this upcoming Easter Bunny election. Um, so through a whole series of these mishaps that are orchestrated by Irontail, Peter accidentally sleeps through Easter morning, and he misses his chance to deliver his eggs, and he loses the whole Easter Bunny election to Irontail. Um, so Peter, realizing the whole gravity of his mistake and this potential ruining of Easter, Peter is given a second chance. So, he starts off this quest to kind of deliver more eggs than Irontail by the next Easter. Um, so Peter, he sets off on this year-long adventure, across various holidays and seasons and all that. So it shows all, like I said, it shows all the holidays like Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day, all of it. 4th of July, and so he's guided by this very like wise and very witty guy named Antoine, who's this toy maker. He's just really kind of a charming French gentleman. It's a very weird like character. So like he has like this, it's a human head, and he's like this French guy. But the rest of his body is like a worm or a caterpillar or something. I'm really not don't know what the hell he is, but but he's just this really unique character who travels in this magical vehicle, which is this kind of a converted parade float. So together, Peter and Antoine, they journey through the year together. They're encountering all these different various holiday celebrations, and they're attempting to have Peter deliver all these Easter eggs. All while they're trying to dodge all these different schemes that Irontail's putting together, and they're learning all these kind of valuable lessons about humility and responsibility and all that, and just the whole true spirit of Easter. So, um, you can kind of expect a lot of really fun encounters here. Catchy songs. Just plenty of that Rankin Bass charm that that goes with these movies naturally. As Peter is trying to redeem himself and just to save Easter. And I think the whole legacy and impact of this movie is really cool. So it's just ever since I've discovered it, it's become kind of a cherished Easter tradition for me and my family. I try to watch it every year around Easter. just because I love like it's just it's nostalgia for me, you know. Even though I discovered this about 10 years ago, it's still part of that whole Rankin Bass universe, which I grew up loving and just adored. And you know, I fell in love with that whole stop motion animation stuff. Um, and you know, just this one in particular, just where it also kind of focuses on like the other holidays and stuff as well, especially Halloween. And Halloween is my favorite holiday, and I love the whole segment in the film regarding Halloween. And it just, I think it just brings joy to me in that, you know, in that sense, and to a lot of people too that love that same type of thing. Um, and I just think that the movie itself, you know, it kind of perfectly captures that spirit of Easter with its kind of vibrant visuals and you know that heartwarming story that is expected with these Rankin Bass stories and just a lot of you know life lessons about humility and you know second chances and all that. It's I think it's really a testament to the kind of enduring power of that Rankin Bass had with that really unique animation style and you know storytelling. And you know, for fans of that, you know, like myself, it's just the that added bonus of Vincent Price, you know, or and Casey Kasem, and just it really elevates this to a another level of charm with that whole Rankin Bass universe. Um, so just yeah, and Vincent Price, I mean, as always, I love the guy. You know, his performances is always just pure gold. You know, even if it is just a voice acting part in this, you know, it's undeniably him. I mean, nobody had such a unique voice like Vincent Price, and I think that was a huge part of his charm and why I adore him so much. I mean, he was a part of Thriller. Man, I mean, like he was a part of Thriller, and anybody that you know that grew up during that generation knows how huge Michael Jackson's Thriller was. Um, But, you know, in short, I guess, you know, Here Comes Peter Cottontail is a very fantastic or hoptastic, either way you want to look at it, uh, Easter treat. You know, I think it's a wonderful example of everything we love about those types of films. Just that really enchanting animation, that you know, catchy tunes, heartwarming story, you know, and in this case, that the added thrill of Vincent Price, you know, for me personally, you know, just kind of hamming it up as the villain here. You know, so if you're, you know, you're looking for a really fun, you know, way to celebrate Easter, um, I definitely recommend watching this. I mean, because you know, this special is an excellent choice. Sorry, I had to put that in there. I know it's super cheesy, but yeah, guys, just check out Here Comes Peter Cottontail if you've never seen it before, if you're a fan of the Rankin Bass stuff, or if you don't even you've never seen any of those films before, you've never seen any of the Rankin Bass stuff. I highly suggest you know jumping into that universe and checking out those films. You know, a lot of them are you know Christmas based, but, if you're looking for a film to watch on Easter or around the Easter holiday, Here Comes Peter Cottontail is definitely one to choose. But up next, I'm gonna be talking about a movie, which this next one is not an Easter movie. There's nothing about Easter, regarding the film, um, but I am gonna be also talking about the follow-up to it, the sequel, right after this one, which is an Easter themed film. But I couldn't just talk about the sequel without talking about the original. So even though this one doesn't fit into the whole Easter fold, um, I have to talk about it. Just it's my OCD, guys. I'm sorry. I mean, it's just it's something that I feel like I'd be doing a disservice to the franchise if I talked about the sequel but not talk about the original. And this is Critters, by the way. This is Critters from 1986. Um, and so with this movie, if you're craving, a dose of like 80s horror comedy that's genuinely fun, and delightfully cheesy in the best ways. And I'm a very cheesy person, so this movie is right up my alley. Um, I mean, it's packed with all kinds of mayhem. Did you just absolutely need this movie in your life if this is the type of stuff that you love like myself. So Critters is so imagine like a popcorn movie, and when I say popcorn movie, I mean like a movie that you can kind of sit down with a bucket of popcorn, enjoy, and just kind of snack as you're watching a movie. Um, this movie gleefully, I think, blends, sorry, um, that whole creature feature, you know, scare element with kind of laugh out loud moments. Um, and it's the kind of movie I think that understands horror. That horror doesn't always have to be grim or gritty to be enjoyable. And Critters really throws this horde of these like furry, porcupine, sharp tooth alien creatures uh, into this really small, unsuspecting town, and just it really just lets the chaos kind of unfold with all this very infectious energy throughout the whole film. So I guess think like Gremlins meets Invasion of the Body Snatchers in a way. I don't know. I know it's kind of confusing, but that's the only thing like I can think of to kind of compare this to. And because of the bounty hunters and everything that come after the Krats, but we'll get into that. But just think of it like that, but with its kind of own distinct and very bizarre flavor. Um, so behind the camera here is Stephen Herrick, who was a director who might surprise you actually with his kind of later career, filmography. And I didn't even realize this until I was putting this review together. But he went on to direct mainstream hits like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and The Mighty Ducks. I think he might have did like Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, if I'm not mistaken. But it's he did this movie in '86, and it really showcases this kind of early knack that Stephen Herrick's early knack for crafting these really engaging stories with a quirky edge, I think. Um, and you can definitely see there's like this hint of this lightheartedness, that would become his signature style, even within that kind of horror context of Critters. Um, so the story here, in a nutshell, is just kind of picture this quiet, rural, like small town. I think it's in Kansas, if I'm not mistaken. And so suddenly these escape pods crash to Earth, kind of unleashing this very swarm of um, like carnivorous furball aliens. And the critters here, or krats, whichever you want to call them, because they're mostly called the film is called Critters, and I think a lot of people, a lot of fans refer to them as critters, but they're called krats in the film. Um, they aren't your normal friendly neighborhood ETs. They're these little hungry, noisy, uh, I don't know. It's hard to describe them. They're these little like aggravating sons of bitches that are attracted to everything that moves. Especially humans in this case. And as the Krats kind of begin their rampage, terrorizing the Brown family and the townsfolk, you know, there's this pair of these shape shifting alien bounty hunters that arrive on Earth to hunt the Krats down. And once they arrive, what ensues is this really hilarious and kind of surprisingly, tense battle for survival as these humans are trying to outsmart and outrun these krats. While the bounty hunters are like struggling to kind of adapt to Earth, and its culture, and there's a lot of like kind of funny results here, especially when Lee keeps transforming into different and you will see that more in Critters 2 as well. But this movie is just a classic, small town under siege scenario. Um, but with this very unique alien twist and just a really a healthy dose of self-aware humor, I think, as well. Um, so this movie is not aiming to be a masterpiece or anything, but I think it's precisely why there's so much charm attached to this film. Um, so Critters is just this pure escapist fun, I think. That's really designed for like a weekend, like a Friday night or Saturday night or whatever, with friends or family and pizza. Uh, Me and Candace, my wife Candace, we love this movie. And I don't think that I have ever showed this one to my son Noah yet, but this is definitely, I think, one I do need to show him. I think he would enjoy it. And funny enough, when my son was born, I was wearing a Critters 4 T-shirt. So there's a little fun fact into my life for you. Um, but the legacy with this movie, I think, lies in perfectly capturing that spirit of 80s creature features. That fantastic practical effects. That makes the Kratts in this movie very genuinely unsettling, but also kind of endearing. And it's a really fast-paced plot, that never lets up here, and there's characters throughout this that you actually root for, and, even as they kinda make these really hilariously bad decisions under pressure, um, but the movie also, I think, really carved its own kinda niche by leaning into that comedic aspect of the horror that's involved here. It definitely doesn't shy away, from the kind of absurdity of the situation, kind of winks at the audience while still delivering these very genuine scares and suspense at times throughout the film. Especially, when is it Billy Green Bush who plays the dad in the movie? When he's getting attacked down the basement by the Kratts. I mean, it's comedic, but it's also very like there's a lot of tension and or a lot of suspense there. So yeah, I mean, this is a definitely right up my alley. This is one of my childhood memories. Just watching this movie at time, and it was a big help in kind of developing my love for comedy horror. Um, and just the creature design of the Kratts here, I think, is iconic in its own right. Just those rows of teeth and just the over the top appetites that these Kratts have is just instantly memorable, I think, with anybody that watches this film. Um, and as I said, the films had success to where it spawned this franchise of sequels. And I'm not going to be talking about all the Critters movies today. I'm just going to be talking about the first two, um, because even though this is not an Easter movie like Critters 2 is, and but I couldn't leave this one out. I had to watch this one and talk about this one as well. Um, and you know, like I said, with the franchise and everything, and the sequels, which are some of these are better than the others, 3 and 4. Uh, but it really proves, I think, that these creatures, these Kratts, has really truly burrowed, if I could just choose a phrase there, it really burrowed their way into the hearts, and maybe nightmares of a lot of fans of this film. Um, so I guess in conclusion, if you're ready for kind of a nostalgic trip back to the '80s with a creature feature that's both really thrilling and just laugh out loud funny at times. I think Critters, is just the ticket for you. Definitely gather some friends, some family members. Um, just check this movie out if you've never seen it before for some reason. Definitely, I highly recommend this one. I don't think if you won't regret sinking your teeth into this one. Again, sorry for the cheesy line, folks. I had to throw that in there. I think I thought it would fit. Um, but moving on now, so to talk about another Easter movie finally for you guys. So this is Critters 2, the sequel to the film we just talked about. This one came out in 1988, and just you can forget the chocolate bunnies or the egg hunts for a second, because this Easter, the real treat is this pure, gooey, gloriously cheesy creature carnage that is Critters 2. Um, so if you're craving a fun, fast paced movie with practical effects that will make you laugh, maybe squirm a little bit at times, then look no further than Critters 2. Again, this is not highbrow horror or anything, guys, but it's exactly what you want. When you're in the mood for some just good old fashioned monster mayhem. Um, so think of it like this. Imagine if Easter eggs hatched into these like hungry, furry, porcupine looking, biting balls of teeth, uh, instead of, you know, adorable chicks or whatever. Um, and that's the kind of delightful chaos I think that Critters 2, unleashes. It doubles down on the fun that came from the original, and it amps up a lot of the creature action and just a really healthy dose of like 80s campiness, and I just think that's what makes this one an absolute blast to watch. This one is my favorite of the entire franchise, by the way. Um, and like I said, it's a blast to watch, especially if you're with a group, whether it be friends, family, whoever. To and as long as you all kind of like appreciate that same type of genre loving aspect, within like comedy, horror, and all that. So this one is definitely fun. The practical effects are definitely a joy to behold in this one, especially compared to the whole CGI overload in today's films. Um, you can, I mean, there's a lot of like practical effects here in this one, and it's so fun. Like there's a lot more humor in this one as well than there is the original. And you know, like I said, while there's definitely some scares and kind of moments of tension in this movie. The thing I love most about this one is that it never takes itself too seriously, um, and that's just the absolute charm of this movie, and I think that's what makes it kind of endlessly rewatchable. Uh, so if you're looking for horror that's more of a roller coaster ride uh, than like a psychological like deep diver thing, then you definitely need to check out Critters 2. Um, I don't think you'll regret this kind of Easter basket full of sharp tooth fun. But to get into the movie a little bit, Critters 2, which the subtitle here is the main course. Um, and I love that they added that in there because it just kind of adds a more comedic aspect to the film. Um, but like I said, it is a sequel to the cult classic Critters from 1986, and it just continues the story of these very carnivorous alien creatures, that are known as the Krites, um, as they're descending upon Earth once again. This time they're targeting this unsuspecting town of Grover's Bend, which is the town that the first movie was based in. But what they didn't get into the whole town part of it. This in the original, they were just at the Brown family's like farm and household and everything, terrorizing them. But this time, they're actually going into town of Grover's Bend, and they're just terrorizing everybody throughout the town for in this one. Um, and this time around, it's during the annual Easter celebration. So, um, yeah, it's a creature feature, through and through. Emphasizing the practical effects, dark humor, and just there's a whole lot of gnawing and chomping from the Kratts. Um, and Critters. This was before I get further into the movie, I want to talk about the director a little bit. So, um, Critters 2 was directed by Mick Garris. Um, and if you're a huge horror fan like me, then Mick Garris is definitely a prominent figure in the horror genre. He's kind of known for his close association with like Stephen King adaptations. Um, and while Critters 2 might seem kind of lighter fare compared to some of his other work, um, Mick Garris, I think, has a very solid pedigree in both film and television horror. Um, he's known for all these like Stephen King adaptations, uh where he directed numerous projects, including like the miniseries like of The Stand, and he did like the Shining miniseries in the '90s, which is not that great. Sorry, Dana, I know you love that one, but I'm not a fan. And he did films like Sleepwalkers, and I think he wrote Hocus Pocus. Um, but outside the whole Stephen King aspect of things, but he these adaptations and stuff that he made were really showcased his ability, I think, to kind of translate, Stephen King's kind of often complex and um, terrifying narratives to the screen. Um, and he also did like the Master of Horrors series. He created that whole series and and produced it, and that ran from like 2005 to 2007, I think. Um, but that series was cool. If you've never checked out the Master of Horror series, definitely check that out because Mick Garris, he brought together some of the biggest names in horror, directing and to create these very original and often edgy, and gruesome short films, like because we had John Carpenter that was involved in that, Don Coscarelli, Joe Dante, just a ton of different names from the horror genre was included in that series. So, and I've got actually all of them here on DVD on my shelf back here. So yeah, definitely check those out if you've never seen the Masters of Horror series. But Mick Garris, he's just a genuine fan too of the genre, and he has his own podcast that I don't. Well, I think he might have ended the podcast. I don't think he don't do that anymore. But this guy, like I said, he's just he's a genuine fan of the genre, and he really brings this kind of playful yet respectful approach to horror when he's filmmaking. And I think Critters 2 really showcases, his knack for balancing scares with humor and kind of creating these very entertaining creature effects and all that. And it's just there's a lot of and just all the mayhem throughout the film. It's and he's not exclusively known for like horror comedies and stuff, but I think that Critters 2 definitely demonstrates his kind of versatility and just his his comfort within the genre. And I think it just goes to prove that he can deliver this very fun, effective creature feature just as well as a more serious horror, film. Um, but now I guess we'll go back into the story. So sorry, sorry, this is kind of like um, all over the place. But just like I said, I wanted to do this kind of really quick, and I know I'm running through these, but I said I do have some pre-show activities to plan for to get into WrestleMania tonight. But yeah, let's go back into the story now of Critters 2. So like I said, this is a year after the events of the first film. That small town of Grover's Bend is preparing for this annual Easter celebration. But unbeknownst to them, this batch of critter eggs that are left behind from the previous invasion in the first film, and and they're discovered by this like local farmer guy and this like young kid or teenager, whatever he is, who they mistake them for these kind of unusually large chicken eggs. So they gather them up and not only kind of place them amongst real Easter eggs, ready to to die and distribute to the local townspeople. So meanwhile, back on the Krat homeworld, the surviving critters have been kind of declared this menace to society there, I guess, and a bounty is placed on them. So these intergalactic bounty hunters, Ugg and Lee, um, excuse me, Ugg and Lee, who were once, which is such a awesome pair of names, Ugg and Lee, Ugly. So it's very creative in my mind, but I'm a very simple minded person. So anyway, um, they're they're still disguised as these humans and stuff, and they're dispatched to Earth to exterminate the remaining Krats that are on Earth. So, however, due to this kind of communication mix up, Charlie is from the first film, who is now with the bounty hunters. He is sent back to Earth with them, and once they arrive on Earth, so Lee Ugg is actually already in his human form. So I told you wrong on that, but like Lee has not found that human form for himself yet. So and there's this whole like thing about like how why Lee keeps changing his his appearance, because he has to find this like true form that's going to fit him for the rest of his life or whatever. So they get to Earth, and there's this Playboy magazine that Charlie finds on the ground, and so like there's and like the fold up posters of this this blonde bombshell centerfold girl, and I forget the actress's name, but so Lee looks at the centerfold poster and turns into this Playboy centerfold, with like and so um, we're in the centerfold where she's completely nude. Um, Lee transforms into this lady from the poster, with tits popping out, and she's basically nude, but she's still got like the gear and everything on over that. So it's a and that might be another reason why this is my favorite of the franchise. So because that woman was, I forget her name now, but she was like a supermodel or whatever, I think. But she was just extremely attractive in that movie. But anyway, as the critter eggs are, they begin hatching around Grover's Bend during this kind of all the Easter festivities. All this chaos just quickly erupts throughout the town, and the the Krats are now in their kind of juvenile stage, I guess, and so they start terrorizing the town. And Brad Brown from the first film, played by Scott Grimes, he is now a teenager at this point, and he returns back to Grover's Bend, and he becomes kind of this reluctant hero once again in this film, and just finding himself the only one who truly understands the danger here. Um, he attempts to kind of warn the 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 former uh, skeptical Sheriff Harv, which I'm not sure why he's kind of like skeptical about all this, because I mean he really he witnessed all this in the first film as well, which it was a different actor. I think it was what was that guy's name? I forget. I'm drawing a blank right now, but it was a different actor who played Harv in the original. But and Brad's also trying to warn these other townsfolk, but but initially, his warnings are kind of dismissed as this kind of teenage exaggeration. Um, but like I said, the bounty hunters arrive, and they they really add another layer of complexity to this situation here. So Ugg and Lee, who have adopted these human forms and stuff, they try to maintain some kind of normalcy, while hunting the Krats. And Lee here is, however, far, I think, less subtle and more focused on immediate extermination. Just kind of often create more collateral damage in in the wake here, through her path. Or he, I don't, it's weird. Like I don't think that these alien bounty hunters even have genders. They just kind of take these forms. So I only referred to as her because at because Lee takes the form of a woman in this one. So, but anyway, besides all that, as this kind of critter infestation grows, exponentially, like without a doubt, it's really fueled by the fact that they reproduce at this very alarming rate. After consuming just about anything, um, and just that situation really becomes increasingly dire for the townsfolk here. Is they're kind of forced to confront this terrifying reality as the critters devour everything in sight, from Easter decorations to pets to unfortunately, a few unlucky townspeople. Um, and the Krites are just demonstrating this very surprising ability, to adapt and learn, and just becoming more cunning and organized. So Brad teams up with the bounty hunters once again, after a little initial confusion and some mistrust there, I think. Um, Realizing they are the only ones who possess the weaponry, really, and expertise to effectively combat the Krats. Um, so they work together, to try and kind of contain this very escalating threat, to the town. And the Krites here are rapidly like multiplying and becoming more dangerous. And just the ending of this film sees the Krites, through these rapid eating and really grotesque bodily functions fused together to form this enormous rolling ball of critters or Krites. And this critter ball really becomes this kind of unstoppable force of destruction, you know, threatened to consume the entire town. Um, but in this kind of desperate final effort, Brad, with the help of the bounty hunters, kind of concocts this plan to use this massive ice cream factory freezer, luring the critters inside. They manage to to just effectively try, destroy it at first. Is what they're thinking. But of course, with a lot of films like this, there's always like that last moment where the monster or the creature or the killer or whatever kind of has that second wind. And so as they're coming to destroy the town, in that whole critter ball like I was talking about, um here comes Charlie, and like in the spaceship, the bounty hunter spaceship, slamming into the critter ball and destroying all of them and saving the town. So the film concludes with this kind of somewhat bittersweet victory, I guess, which you'd have to watch the movie to kind of understand. Um, it, just having survived this another critter onslaught, but they're forever marked kind of by this experience. You know what I mean? Um, and this movie, Critters 2, I think it really solidified the Critters franchise as a very fun and entertaining corner of this the horror comedy genre. I mean, the legacy that this movie has brought can be seen in several ways. I mean, because while the original Critters was a solid B movie creature feature, Critters 2 is kind of often considered by fans, I think, to be even more enjoyable and memorable. Personally, I feel that way. And it definitely, I think, upped the ante on in terms of kind of creature action, humor, and just sheer ridiculousness. And it kind of established that you know that template, I guess you could call it, that for like the later sequels would attempt to to follow with kind of a little bit of success. I mean, but like I alluded to earlier, like Critters 3 and Critters 4 aren't that great. And then there's a new one too. I think. Oh, well, it's not really new. It came out a few years ago. I think it's called like Critters Attack or something. Which I think D Wallace actually comes back for that one, but I've still not seen that one. I've only seen up to Critters 4, and after Critters 3 and 4, which are not that great. Um, I kind of wasn't really interested in seeing anything that came out after uh, those two movies. And I think there might be like a little mini series or a TV series or something too. I don't know. I'm not sure. May have to look into that. But yeah, I mean, in the in the late 1980s, so creature features were still super popular, but they kind of often leaned into more serious horror. Um, Critters 2, I think, leaned heavily into the comedy aspect here, without really sacrificing all those kind of monster thrills. So this, I think, really helped solidify just the horror comedy subgenre. Um, and just showed that audiences, were kind of receptive to that these monster movies, and it didn't really take them, too seriously anyway. Um, and it was released during a time, when CGI was kind of starting to creep its way in the filmmaking. Um, but Critters 2 was like, so so what? That they doubled instead they doubled down on like the practical creature effects of this movie, and I think that's another respectable thing that I have for this movie. Because the critters themselves, the animatronics and all the gooey, messy carnage and all that, are created using these practical methods, which I think a lot of horror fans find more kind of tactile and satisfying than any of that early CGI stuff. Um, but I think the film is remembered and appreciated for its for all of that, for its kind of impressive practical effects, uh, and it's just just being a lot of fun in the process. Um, but this movie overall, has become this really cult classic, particularly among fans of 80s horror and creature features. It's that blend of horror and comedy and practical effects, gives it a very unique charm. And it definitely resonates, with audiences who appreciate these elements. And it's often revisited and I think celebrated as a more fun and rewatchable horror, um, for a lot of fans. Um, so yeah, if you've never seen Critters, you've never seen Critters 2 or any of the Critters movies, I definitely suggest giving them a shot. I mean, they're a lot of fun. There's a lot of memories for those movies for me growing up as a developing horror fan as a kid. So yeah, I think especially the first one. I mean, maybe not the second because there is some nudity and stuff like that, but like definitely the first one you can show to kids. I think would be okay. I mean, there's a little few there might be some language in there that just depending on what parents agree with, don't agree with, whatever. I highly suggest showing the original Critters though, kind of to your kids, or just to kind of, if you're wanting to get them interested in horror, it's definitely a gateway for kids to kind of get into more serious horror later on as they age. um but I guess I will move on to my last film for the Easter portion of this show. And I said I said earlier, guys, I thought this was going to be a really quick thing. I thought this was going to be short, but it looks like this might end up being just a normal length show. So I may have to try to speed through the rest of these. But this last movie that when we talk about for the Easter portion is a movie that I had never seen before. Um, but it was always been on my radar because one of my closest friends is actually the director and the creator of this movie. Um, and So I let him know that I was going to be watching this movie for my Easter special. He was like, "Oh God," or whatever. So, um, and he when we talked about this movie after I watched it, I talked about this movie with him, and he acts like it's like the worst movie ever made, and it's absolutely horrible stuff. Listen, I've seen a lot of crap, and this one, is definitely better than a lot of crap that I've seen. I mean, is this the best movie in the world? Is this like a masterpiece? Maybe not. I mean, but I had a lot of fun with this one. And this is Easter Sunday from 2014. And this was directed by a close friend of mine named Jeremy Moorhead. And I think I've mentioned him a couple times here on the show in the past. Um, but let me go ahead and just get into this. So, um, this movie is definitely like even though it has that Easter theme to it, this is definitely one that you could definitely watch around, the Halloween season or just any time throughout the year, as a horror fan. Um, and I think this is on Tubi if you guys want to check it out for free. So yeah, definitely go. That's where I watched it. And but like I said, this one of those movies. Even though it has that Easter theme to it, you can definitely watch this anytime throughout the year. Um, it's definitely more trick than treat, I think, in the best way possible. Um, and this is another one, like, why I enjoyed this one so much because it's a lot of fun. It's not something that's trying to gain any kind of awards or anything. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It embraces that absurdity of this, like, killer, Easter bunny, serial killer, possessed whatever. So, but yeah, it's just like, and we'll get into that. You'll understand more as I get into it. But like, I think this movie is definitely worth checking out for sure. Just there's a lot of humor in this that is just right up my alley, and I had so much fun watching it. And it's one I would definitely watch again for sure. Um, so this film throws you head first into this world where Easter is kind of synonymous with evisceration more than anything. It's got that kind of wonderfully wicked, B movie charm to it that I think many horror fans, including myself, I just absolutely adore. So think like Maniac Cop meets Shaun of the Dead with this kind of hefty dose of Easter carnage thrown in, and you're on the right track. So the mastermind, like I said, behind all this mayhem is a close friend of mine, Jeremy Todd Moorhead, and he also worked on like the Fred Heads documentary, and he's a big fan of the genre. Yeah, I mean, this guy absolutely loves horror and sci-fi and just film in general. And while we may not be close where we live, we don't see each other in person a lot. Jeremy is I still consider one of my closest friends. He's a guy that I talk to almost daily. Um, you know, he's been put in a situation here lately where he was diagnosed with leukemia, and but he beat all that. He's going through all like the chemotherapy, I think, and stuff right now, and he is I think his brother just like was a donor for him for some. Sorry, I don't know all the details, and I apologize to him and to his family and stuff for not knowing all the details. But I'm just so happy that he is recovering from that. Me and my family were praying for him on like a daily basis when he was going through when he found out about all that stuff. A few months ago. Um, and I'm just happy to call Jeremy my friend. I met Jeremy probably about 15, 16 years ago, something like that, when I was early getting into the whole horror convention scene. And I can't remember if I like met him through like a message board or what it was, but like there's very few people that I've become friends with in life where there's just this immediate and instant bond and trust with one another. And I definitely have that with Jeremy. Um, I don't know how it came about, and I'm so glad it did though. Jeremy's an absolutely wonderful person. Um, you know, and one of the kindest people that I've ever met in my life. And I just wanted to, I wanted to cover this movie that he directed. Um, 4 of my 500 movies in 2025 series, just to as a to show my gratitude to him for being such a good friend for me for many years. Um, but let's go ahead and jump into the story. And just again, love you, Jeremy. If you watch this, I just appreciate you, more than you know, man. Um, but let's go ahead and get into the story now about this movie. So, just picture this. It's around the Easter holiday, and these group of I don't know if they're supposed to be portraying teenagers or like people like in their 20s, but we'll call them this group of people who decide they start have this party, and then they decide to kind of spice up their party by dabbling in the occult with the Ouija board and all that. So it's bad idea, kids. So they accidentally resurrect the spirit of Douglas Fisher, who was this notorious serial killer from years past, known as this bunny mass killer. And he is the father of one of the people that's in the friends group here. Um, but so he was executed, years ago on Easter by Sheriff Arkin, who's played by Robert Zadar here. Um, and this resurrected bunny man, is back for bloody vengeance now, and and just gives a whole new meaning to an Easter egg hunt. Only this time the eggs are filled with terror, and the prize is staying alive until midnight. So this group finds themselves in this kind of race against time, just desperately trying to stop this serial killer bunny, or possessed serial killer bunny, like whatever you want to call it. Um, and before he like turns his town into like I guess a gruesome Easter basket of body parts. Um, it's a very simple premise, kind of with this really over the top, kind of gore and playful humor, and just I think it's perfect, for a kind of a late night horror craving, and especially if you're looking for something to watch on Tubi, I, I recommend this one. And I think what makes this movie stand out, especially for horror fans, is just its commitment to the premise and kind of knowing those little winks, to the genre. And, it doesn't try to be a masterpiece. It aims to be this kind of fun and gory and ridiculous horror, romp and it nails it, I think. Plus, for those who appreciate genre legends, Easter Sunday, really holds this kind of special significance as this film includes the iconic Robert Zadar from the Maniac Cop series. Just seeing him as Sheriff Arkin is really a treat in itself. Um, and it's also a fitting, I think, farewell to the legend of B movie horror, as he after this was filmed, he died shortly after they filmed this movie. And then also, for genre fans, you can also keep an eye out in the film for Ari Lehman, who was the original Jason Voorhees. So his appearance in this kind of adds another layer of fun for hardcore horror fans. Um, and you know, sorry, Jeremy. While Easter Sunday might not be winning any Oscars, um, it definitely carves out a very solid niche of in the realm of fun. That campiness of horror and just so and I had so much fun with this. I had so much fun watching this, and I was like sending messages to Jeremy as I was watching it, just kind of giving him like my commentary on different scenes. And so if you're looking for a movie that's going to make you just you're looking to have fun with, not take too seriously, um, then check out Easter Sunday. Again, it's on Tubi, uh, and just give it a shot if you're looking for like an Easter themed horror film. Because I love holiday horror films, and like there's not that many out there around Easter. So definitely check this one out if you're looking for something like that. Just maybe hide the chocolate bunnies first. This so this one's this is a bloody good time for horror fans, who just appreciate a bit of ridiculousness with the whole horror element. But that does it for the whole Easter portion of this show. So now we're going to jump into one of my favorite, if not, aside from God and my family, uh, my favorite thing on this planet, which is pro wrestling. I've got my Sting shirt on, even though Lex Luger decided not to talk about Sting in his Hall of Fame speech the other night. Still got to represent the Stinger. Stinger is my favorite wrestler of all time, and with this being WrestleMania weekend, and also Easter weekend, not only did I just absolutely had to watch these Easter movies, but I had to watch some wrestling movies as well to just kind of in the spirit of WrestleMania weekend. Um, and for this first wrestling movie we're going to talk about, and this one may very well be my favorite wrestling movie of all time. Um, and and if you're like me and you breathe, sleep, eat, bleed, shit wrestling, and you just you spend a lot of your free time watching these different wrestling promotions and these matches and all that, and just kind of I'm always scouring for new wrestling content I've never seen. But let me tell you about a movie that I have seen plenty of times. Like I said, this may be my favorite wrestling movie of all time. And it might be one that even slipped under your radar, but I think it actually deserves a spot in your viewing rotation as a wrestling fan, or if you're looking for a wrestling movie to watch. And this is Body Slam from 1986. And this movie was directed by the legendary Hal Needham, who is the mastermind behind a ton of like Burt Reynolds comedy movies like Smoking the Bandit, Cannonball Run, and Hooper, and just stuff like that. And this movie isn't your kind of Oscar bait wrestling drama or anything like Iron Claw. Um, Instead, Needham brings his kind of signature blend of like light-hearted fun and charming characters, and just a touch of action to the squared circle here. And trust me, as a wrestling fanatic, this approach works perfectly. I mean, the story centers around this guy named Harry Smilak, who's played by Dirk Benedict, as you may know from the A-Team. Um, so Harry is like this kind of music promoter who's down on his luck, and he's desperately trying to revive his career. And he's got this rock band named Kick, but let's just say they aren't setting the charts on fire or whatever. So through this kind of series of hilarious and communications, um, and it's kind of like a dash of good old fashioned 80s serendipity here, Harry stumbles upon a new talent, which is Quick Rick Roberts, who is portrayed by none other than the iconic Rowdy Roddy Piper. Now, you can forget any kind of notions of the deep Shakespearean plots or anything like that, but Body Slam is just pure, unadulterated wrestling entertainment in movie form. So Harry, realizing that his music management skills aren't cutting it, we aren't cutting the mustard, brother. Um, it it he decides to kind of dive headfirst into this wild world of professional wrestling, becoming Rick Roberts' manager, and it's here I think that really the real magic begins with this film. So we get to see Harry kind of navigate these backstage politics and these really flamboyant personalities of the wrestling world. He pairs Rick with this powerhouse Tonga Tom, who is played by the Tonga Kid, who you may know, from the legendary Anoa family. He's the twin brother of pro wrestler Rikishi. He's the father of Jacob Fatu, who just won the United States Championship last night on night one of WrestleMania. And they create this tag team that starts to kind of gain serious momentum. But as wrestling fans know, success always comes with conflict. So, enter the villainous Captain Lou Morano, is his name in this. So, who's played by Captain Lou Albano. So Lou, who's Rick's former manager, is just this classic heel manager. We all love to hate, and his rivalry with Harry is just pure wrestling gold. And I love Captain Lou Albano. I mean, I think he's one of the greatest wrestling managers of all time. And this film, I think, perfectly captures that spirit of 80s wrestling. It's that over the top, it's cheesy in the best possible way. It's packed with all these really charismatic personalities. Um, and the storyline unfolds like a classic wrestling story. This underdog story, this rise to prominence, just this inevitable clash with this established villain, and it's all done with kind of a wink and a nod, never taking itself too seriously, which is exactly what makes it so enjoyable and so relatable to the actual, sport of pro wrestling. And yes, I call pro wrestling a sport because it is, and fuck you. But anyway, um, what truly elevates Body Slam for wrestling fans like myself is just the authenticity of it. Just having Roddy Piper and Lou Albano in these prominent roles isn't just stunt casting. They are wrestling. They represent what wrestling is, especially during that time in the 80s. Their performances really bleed this charisma and bring this genuine wrestling flavor that you just can't fake. Seeing Piper in the ring, even in a movie context, is a thrill for me. And Captain Lou Albano is in his absolute element as this character that he's playing, which is really like not far from like his actual gimmick that he was doing in pro wrestling at the time. Um, but beyond, these two legends, you keep your eyes peeled because you'll spot other familiar faces and names from the wrestling world in this movie, which adds, another layer of enjoyment for those that are in the know. Um, but beyond the wrestling, the movie also really cleverly incorporates Harry's music background, the rock and wrestling concept, which is something that they really used in the WWF around this time too, with Cyndi Lauper and all that, going into the first WrestleMania. Um, but with the rock and wrestling concept, they combine wrestling shows with these rock concerts, and it's not only a fun plot device, but it just yeah, like I said, it actually echoes that real life rock and wrestling connection era of the WWF in the 80s. Um, it's a brilliant way, I think, to blend those two forms of entertainment. and just really adds another layer of 80s nostalgia to the film. Um, so don't go into Body Slam expecting a gritty, realistic portrayal of professional wrestling. This is a fun, feel good movie. I think this is designed to entertain. I think it succeeds definitely with that. And it's just, it's packed with laughs and just has this really charming, romantic subplot with Tanya Roberts, who plays Candace Vanderwagen, I think is her last name. So I just refer to her as Candace. But anyway, um, and I love Tanya Roberts was smoking hot. I mean, around this time in the '80s, and absolutely love her. And still very sad that she passed away a few years ago. And just her character, really delivers, in a way that's really most exciting and true to that era as well. So while Body Slam might not be considered a cinematic masterpiece or anything, its legacy for wrestling fans, I think, is undeniable. It's a fun, accessible movie that captures the the energy and excitement of '80s wrestling in a way that few others really have. Um, it's a reminder of a more innocent and overtly fun era of the business, I think. Um, and it showcases the charisma of wrestling icons like Piper and Albano to a wider audience. And for fans today, it's just a fantastic piece of wrestling nostalgia. And genuinely just an enjoyable movie night experience. I mean, so in conclusion, if you're a wrestling fan, if you haven't seen Body Slam, you're definitely missing out. I mean, this is, like I said, I think this might be one for a lot of people that's kind of flew under the radar, but do not sleep on this one. It is a blast of just celebration of '80s wrestling culture. Just a downright fun movie. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would suggest watching this one with a few wrestling buddies or something, and just just to check it out for those of you that and it would be good if like all of you, if you got to group with a group of buddies to watch this, just and you'd all had never seen this. I mean, that would be a really fun time, I think, for you guys, and I definitely don't think you would regret stepping into the ring with this movie. But now moving on to the next movie, which is a movie that I have seen many, many times since I was a kid. Um, and this one is just this is pure gold, pure entertainment here. Um, this is No Holds Barred from 1989, starring Hulk Hogan. So if you're a fan of that whole golden era of wrestling, larger than life personalities and stories, that are as over the top as anything you can think of, um, then you absolutely need to experience this piece of wrestling cinema. Uh, so this movie was directed by Thomas J. Wright, who you might know from his extensive television work directing episodes of shows like Miami Vice, Quantum Leap. Um, so No Holds Barred isn't aiming for like Oscar gold or anything, and frankly, I think that's part of its charm. So Thomas Wright, he brings this very solid, no nonsense directing style that keeps the action, I think, flowing and the story moving in No Holds Barred, and I think he really perfectly complements that kind of nature of just professional wrestling and the world that wrestling portrays. I think he kind of understands how to capture that energy and that spectacle, making it a perfect fit for this kind of movie. But it also does help that Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan were executive producers on this movie, so they definitely probably pointed him in the right direction of things that they could do to kind of like um, definitely resemble what WWF was portraying at the time. So let's go ahead and get to this story. And don't worry, I'm keeping this completely spoiler free for people just in case you've never seen No Holds Barred. So imagine this: you've got Rip Thomas, who's played by the immortal Hulk Hogan, and he is the reigning World Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion. And he is not just a wrestler, he's this genuinely global phenomenon, much like how Hulk Hogan was at this time. He's a ratings juggernaut that every network wants a piece of. So enter Mr. Tom Brill, this head honcho of the struggling World Television Network, and this guy is desperate for a hit. And Rip Thomas is the golden ticket he thinks will save his sinking ship. So Braille, seeing Rip as his potential savior, tries to lure him over to the World Television Network. But Rip, being the honorable champion that he is, politely declines. This doesn't sit well with Braille. He feels rejected and belittled, and Braille, in this kind of classic villain fashion, decides that if he can't have Rip, then he'll create something to destroy him. And this kind of sets the stage for this classic clash of egos and ideals. And Brill's twisted plan unfolds at this dive bar called the No Count Bar or something like that. I can't, which is, it's just really like kind of perfectly wrestling themed bar almost, and it's got the likes of like Stan Hansen in there and a few other guys. So he kind of concocts this wrestling show called the Battle of the Tough Guys, and this is where things get really interesting. So he unleashes Zeus, this mountain of a man, an ex-convict with a history, connected to Rip's own trainer. And Zeus is everything that Rip isn't. He's brutal, he's uncontrollable, and just seemingly unstoppable. So he becomes Braille's new wrestling sensation, a direct threat to Rip's dominance. And just adding another layer to the drama of everything, um, we meet Samantha Moore, which is funny because I grew up with a girl named Samantha Moore that I've known since kindergarten. But Samantha Moore in this movie is this corporate spy that's sent by Braille to infiltrate Rip's life and, let's just say, compromise it. However, in this kind of heartwarming and very wrestling movie appropriate twist, Rip's genuine goodness and charitable nature ends up winning Samantha over. And Hogan definitely didn't have anything to do with that, I bet. But anyway, she sees the real Rip Thomas, the hero he is, both in and out of the ring, and she switches sides, confessing, her true mission to Rip. And this is where the movie kind of throws in these elements of classic heroism and redemption, which, wrestling fans eat that shit up and they love it. I love it. I know the other wrestling fans do as well. And of course, Braille isn't one to take betrayal very lightly here. So things escalate quickly with these kind of kidnapping attempts and these violent threats, and just showing how ruthless that Braille is. He's got the ruthless aggression. So Rip, true to the character here, stands up for what's right, protecting Samantha and embodying the whole hero persona that wrestling fans adore. Um, but the conflict kind of intensifies when Rip's younger brother Randy gets caught in the whole crossfire of all these schemes that Braille is pushing. Um, and it's a brutal attack that sends, Randy to the hospital, you know, um, just pushing Rip to his breaking point. Just this brotherly bond becomes a central emotional core of the film, giving Rip a more personal stake in this escalating rivalry with Zeus. Rip initially reluctant to engage in Braille's kind of circus of schemes here is now just driven by this righteous anger and this need to protect his family. So he accepts the challenge to face Zeus, not for fame or fortune, but for vengeance and honor. And just the build up to the final showdown is fantastic. We see Zeus just training like a beast, while Rip dedicates his time to supporting his injured brother. Highlighting their kind of contrasting characters and motivations. Um, and just the ending of this, is it culminates in this epic match between Rip and Zeus. And I'll leave it at that. Like I said, I wanted to talk about this, but I want to try to keep it as spoiler free as I can. So definitely, if you've never seen this movie, just check out this movie, how it ends. Um, and it's you know, this whole movie is served with in a way that only a late '80s action wrestling movie can deliver. Um, and just it occupies a very unique space in wrestling movie history. It's not, a masterpiece or anything, much like how about all of Hulk Hogan's movies are. Um, but I love it. There's something so charming about it. It's just to for a lot of wrestling fans, especially, it's become this kind of cult classic over the decades that it's been out. It's just kind of like a time capsule of this specific era of wrestling. Much like how Body Slam was, and it really captures that larger than life characters and straightforward storytelling that define the late '80s WWF. And it's a movie you can throw on with friends. Just have a blast watching it. Which I have in the past. Like I remember one of my fondest memories from going to conventions is like we were in this hotel room. I was with the Dead Pit Radio guys and a few other friends, and we were all watching this movie and just having so much fun, just laughing our asses off at this. Um, and it's just a reminder that sometimes that all you need is a good versus evil story, some hard hitting action, just a hero that you can root for, and like Rip Thomas. Um, and I just think that No Holds Barred, delivers on all of those fronts. And if you haven't seen it, definitely do yourself a favor, check out No Holds Barred. Just go into it, expecting a lot of fun and just a lot of cheesy wrestling stuff, and I think you'll come out thoroughly entertained. It's a fantastic trip for me personally down memory lane, and just for other longtime wrestling fans who and it's just this very wild, enjoyable ride for anyone who appreciates a good over the top Hulk Hogan film. Uh, so yeah, highly recommend this one for a wrestling movie night as well. So moving on, the next movie I want to talk about is another one of my top favorite wrestling movies of all time. And so when I tell you that there's a movie out there that's pure wrestling infused fun, that really captures the spirit of late '90s, early 2000s wrestling, um, you definitely need to check out Ready to Rumble. Um, and trust me, this isn't some Hollywood attempt to understand our world as wrestling fans. This is a love letter to the glorious and chaotic and captivating world of professional wrestling, especially those wild days of WCW in '99, 2000. So this movie was directed by Brian Robbins, and he's a name that you might recognize, from comedies like Varsity Blues and Good Burger. He also worked on other Nickelodeon projects like Kenan and Kel, and he's actually currently the head honcho for Paramount and Nickelodeon. Um, and Ready to Rumble isn't trying to be like a cinematic masterpiece or anything either. It's just really it's aiming for something that's much more important, I think, to make you laugh until your sides hurt, you know, cheer for the underdogs and just relive those Monday Nitro nights where anything felt possible at times. I mean, definitely anything was possible in like WCW in '99 or 2000, and that's no joke for and people who really lived during that time when Nitro was still on in 1999 2000, and you just lived those moments. You definitely will know what I mean. But the story here is, I think, deceptively simple. And it's that's part of its charm, I think. Though we're introduced to Gordy Boggs and Sean Dawkins, who are these two friends that are that are obsessed with wrestling, WCW in particular. They're these. They're also like they have this really hard job of being these sanitation workers, and but like I said, yeah, but more importantly, they're huge wrestling fans, and specifically with WCW and this seemingly untouchable WCW World Heavyweight Champion Jimmy King, played by Oliver Platt. Um, and these guys are us. These guys represent us as the wrestling fans. They're the fans in the cheap seats, the ones who know every wrestler's finisher. That argue passionately about who's going over. Um, and when they witness their hero here, Jimmy King, get screwed out of the title in this kind of blatant act of backstage shenanigans, orchestrated by the dastardly Diamond Dallas Page. Yes, Diamond Dallas Page. So, and this slimy wrestling promoter, Titus Sinclair, played by Joey Pants, um, from Goonies fame and The Matrix and all that. Um, but and then there's and DDP's cronies as well. But Gordy and Sean, they're sent on this mission, a mission to right this wrong. Which is a mission that's fueled by septic truck fumes and just a whole lot of wrestling, fanaticism. So what follows, I think is just this is very hilarious and heartwarming at the same time. Just think Dumb and Dumber meets No Holds Barred here, but with even more heart, and a just a genuine affection for the wrestling world, um, because it's presented by these guys who represent us as wrestling fans. And our heroes here, they embark on, this quest to find the fallen champion, Jimmy King, and reignite that fire in him. And let me tell you, what they find is not the glorious warrior that they remember, but it's a man who has lost his way. And this really sets up this classic underdog story, but it's done with such a really goofy charm and just genuine love for wrestling that it's impossible not to get invested in the story here. Um, the movie throws you headfirst into this kind of backstage world, or at least a kind of a exaggerated comedic version of it, um, which is not really far fetched, just considering how WCW was ran during this time when the movie came out. But you'll see a lot of familiar faces here, and I mean a lot of familiar faces. We're talking a who's who of these WCW legends, like from Goldberg, Booker T, Sting, Billy Kidman, Disco Inferno, Sid Vicious, Perry Saturn. Just the names go on and on and on throughout the. There's a ton of guys in this film, and actually Canyon was the stunt double in this for Oliver Platt in the role of Jimmy King. So I thought that was super cool as well. But just seeing these icons, on the big screen, not just portraying themselves, but often kind of playing along with the movie's humor is just, I think, an absolute treat for any wrestling fan. It's like a WCW house show exploded onto film, or an episode of WCW Nitro or something exploded on the film. Um, but beyond all the wrestler cameos and stuff, Ready to Rumble truly works because at its core, it's about passion and believing in something, and even when it seems ridiculous. Um, and Gordy and Sean's kind of unwavering faith in Jimmy King, and just their determination to see him back on top is both hilarious and kind of surprisingly inspiring. As a wrestling fan, um, they're the ultimate ride or die fans, and just this unwavering support is kind of infectious at times. And I think if you've never seen this movie, if you're looking for a good wrestling movie to watch, I mean, I just like Body Slam and No Holds Barred, definitely recommend this one. This is one of my favorites of all time when it comes to wrestling movies. I think Body Slam just slightly beats it out, but Ready to Rumble definitely gives it a run for its money. The humor in this movie is very broad. It definitely leans into slapstick and absurdity, which is definitely right up my alley. Um, but it's never mean spirited or anything. It pokes fun at these wrestling themes that we all know and love, or love to groan at, or whatever. But it does so with kind of a wink and a nod. Never disrespecting the business itself. And so there are genuinely like these kind of moments that are scattered throughout from these like that are hilarious, like the farting nuns to the wrestling moves being used in the most unexpected places and situations. Um, and while it's very silly, it's also surprisingly touching at times. Showcasing the kind of that camaraderie and these unlikely friendships that can be forged around this very shared love of wrestling. And I can definitely relate to that personally, because I have became friends with people through the love for wrestling that I would probably never be friends with in any other situation. Um, because you can be two completely different personalities of people, but as a huge wrestling fan, like none of that other stuff matters. Whether it be, personal interest, politics, whatever, none of that shit matters when wrestling it comes to wrestling to me. And like so and that's why, I have such a large number of friends who love wrestling. And, we may not agree all the time on other things, but one thing we can agree on is that we love wrestling. And I just think that this movie is a fine example of that, and that lifestyle. Um, and this Ready to Rumble isn't going to win any Oscars or anything, and it wasn't. It's definitely not for everyone, but I just think for a wrestling fan, this movie is so representative. It's just pure gold, for a wrestling fan. It's just it's a nostalgic trip back to that peak of the Monday Night Wars. You know, a celebration of the larger than life personalities and ridiculous storylines that that we all devoured. And it's a really feel good comedy, that understands our passion, speaks our language, and just it delivers a stinger splash of fun right to your heart, as a wrestling fan. Um, if you're looking for a serious wrestling documentary, this ain't it. But if you're ready to turn your brain off, and just spend like 90 minutes laughing your head off with a movie that genuinely gets what it means to be a wrestling fan, then Ready to Rumble is definitely one you should check out. Go watch it, and tell me you didn't mark out at least once. You won't be able to resist. I mean, this is more than just a movie for me. It is like a party. Uh, and speaking of parties, there is a particular scene in this is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie involving Jimmy King and Mean Gene, and so yeah, I mean it's just and definitely check this out. I mean, It's one I think you won't regret watching. Especially if you're a wrestling fan, and it may just hit close to home for you as it does me. But now that brings me to the last movie of this stream, this video. Um, and really, I mean, I probably should have just stopped with Ready to Rumble. It would have been a perfect ending to this, but I had to choose another one, of course, knowing me, because I wanted to start off the wrestling movies I was going to be watching and talking about with Body Slam, which stars Roddy Piper. So I thought, well, let's book in this thing and and watch another movie with Roddy Piper about wrestling. And like I said, boy, did I wish I could I should have just stopped at Ready to Rumble. Because this next movie, and this is no disrespect to any of the wrestlers that are involved in this movie, and I want to try to talk about this as briefly as I can because I don't have a lot of positive things to say about this movie I'm going to be talking about. Um, and unfortunately, it would end up being one of Roddy Piper's last ever movies that he made before he died. Um, and I would love to know what he thought about this movie. But this is Pro Wrestlers versus Zombies from 2013. So, as a lifelong wrestling fan, you know, and a horror fan, the title Pro Wrestlers versus Zombies just hits you with this like this feeling of hype, like it's something. Oh wow, that's something I definitely got to see. And this was my first time watching. This is probably my last time watch. So finally, we had this cinematic collision of two of my favorite worlds, wrestling and horror, and just the promise of this larger than life, personalities dropping elbows on the undead, um, using steel chairs as zombie slaying weapons. It's kind of B movie that brilliance that you dream of that, and sadly, that dream is precisely what this film remains. It's more of a nightmare, actually, um, because the reality is a disastrously dull and just disappointingly cheap thing that just feels like a jobber losing in under a minute, to a squash match. um, so I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to. I'm just going to talk about this briefly. So let's talk about the story. Rather the thin frayed thread that they dare call a story. Um, we're kind of given this convoluted, and frankly unnecessary backstory involving this infidelity, accidental death in the ring, um, and it's like demon summoning revenge plot. It's it's overly complicated and it just takes far too long to set up, and it kind of leaves you, scratching your head and just wondering, when the zombies are going to actually show up, and just more importantly, when the wrestling is going to begin. Because all the wrestlers that's in this movie, bless their hearts, you know, for even being a part of this, uh, they don't actually play like characters for the film. They're playing themselves. Roddy Piper, Shane Douglas, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Matt Hardy, Kurt Angle. They're all playing themselves in this, or their wrestling personalities in this movie, and they're like all the main characters. Um, so, but the motivation, for our zombie outbreak here feels very forced. and just utterly lacking any kind of internal logic or engaging drama. Instead of this a thrilling, adrenaline fueled fight for survival, we get this kind of sluggish, poorly paced story that just lurches forward like a badly made zombie or something. And the wrestling aspect of it, you would think, given the title and the presence of these actual wrestlers, that that this would be kind of front and center, and instead the wrestling feels like an afterthought, and just like it's just the wrestlers involved in this story of you know of of fighting zombies, and it's a concept that should be awesome, but it's not. There I, I just absolutely could not stand this movie. I mean, there's no really any attempt to kind of integrate these wrestling aspect of things into like combating these zombies. You know, we're we're promised wrestlers versus zombies, but what we get is more like just wrestlers occasionally bumping into zombies in just moments that should be epic. I would think, but like a zombie taking a DDT or a wrestler using a turnbuckle to gain an advantage or something like that, would be fun. But all that is just completely absent here and kind of painfully underwhelming. Um, it's it's a crime against both wrestling and zombie themes when it comes to movies. Um, and and the acting here is well, to put it mildly, rougher than a steel cage match with barbed wire. So, well, some of the wrestlers, like I said, bless their hearts, they're clearly trying. They're not giving anything resembling decent dialogue. Poor Roddy Piper, man. I mean, man, who was a hell of a, and he's the best part about this movie. I mean, he's really the only thing that kind of is a saving grace to this movie, and it's not even really a saving grace. But man, and I hate to feel that way because I don't want to do anything that would disrespect Roddy Piper and the memory of Roddy Piper because that was a guy that I met on several different occasions, and he always remembered me every time. And he was just one of the kindest guys, wrestlers, celebrity, whatever, whatever, human beings. He was one of the kindest human beings that I ever met in my life. And, his birthday was just the other day, which is about, I think, like 3 days ago or something. And, I always think about Roddy Piper. I'm a huge, huge fan. Man, he's one of my all-time favorites, and just sad to see what he did with like They Live and Body Slam and Hell Comes to Frogtown, even to this to this movie. I mean, it's really insulting to his legacy, in my opinion. Um, but like I said, these wrestlers, they're not given anything resembling any kind of decent dialogue or any kind of character development. And just all the performances kind of range from wooden to unintentionally hilarious. And aside from Roddy Piper, because I thought he did great in the film. I mean, for what he was given to work with. But all of this is not in a so bad it's good kind of way, but it's more of a please make it stop kind of way. Um, and just the non wrestler actors, they fare no better here. So, and they're just everybody here just feels trapped in this script that makes no sense, and just these characters that are flatter than a flitter, uh, and just I think it's a visually it's a disaster. Um, The zombie makeup is very cheap, like cheaper than Dawn of the Dead cheap. Um, but see, Dawn of the Dead came out in 1978. This movie came out in 2013. For 1978, the effects in Dawn of the Dead was fucking groundbreaking. There's no excuse with this movie, and because in 2013, your makeup effects for zombies should not look like poorly applied face paint. You know, and that may have been what it was in 1978 with Dawn of the Dead. But we hadn't, evolved to what we have now. So, again, there's no excuse. And just the locations in this movie, while aiming for kind of a gritty, you know, aesthetic to everything, just really comes across as very drab and just uninspired. Um, the action sequences are just very poorly choreographed, and um, although I will say, like, just seeing Kurt Angle putting a zombie in an ankle lock or doing an ankle slam to a zombie was kind of hilarious. I'm not gonna lie. Um, but it just all of it just kind of makes it difficult to follow what's happening, and it sucks any kind of potential excitement, right out of everything involved. Um, it's a low budget film that looks like a low budget film. It was distributed by Troma, um, if that tells you anything, and not in like a charmingly way. Because I'm not going to say that I don't like Troma, because I do. I mean, I love Toxic Avenger and Sergeant Kabuki Man and Terra Firma and Poultrygeist and all kinds of stuff. But those are the films that were put out by Troma, by Lloyd Kaufman, and this the production company within Troma. This was a movie that was done by Cody Knotts, and I don't know what happened to Cody Knotts, but hopefully he got out of filmmaking. But this was just distributed by Troma, and so that's the only really connection that Troma has to this film, and it just feels like, where did the budget for this movie even go? Other than, it had to be just for like all of the wrestlers that are involved. You know what I mean? But ultimately, I think Pro Wrestlers versus Zombies fails on almost every level, and it's neither a good wrestling movie nor a good zombie movie. It really squanders its potentially fun premise with a nonsensical plot, terrible acting, and just really, really poor execution. So, as a wrestling fan, I felt kind of insulted by how lazy and everything that was handled, and how everything came across in this movie. Instead of a loving tribute or even a goofy, entertaining mashup, I think it's a slap in the face that devalues both professions. So avoid this like a poorly executed pile driver is what I say. It's a and you will rarely hear me. So you have to know that I really hated this movie to say what I'm saying about it. Because you will rarely hear this from me, because I am very easily entertained by 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 films, especially really low budget horror films. But this is just a botch, and not just not an entertaining botch, but just a botch that will leave you feeling less entertained and more like you've just been defeated by boredom for the longest fucking 3 count in wrestling history or something. There are far better ways, I think, to spend your time. And, you know, but I could have just left this out. I could have not even reviewed this, but I try to be as honest as I can. And I watched this movie, so I felt like, all right, I'm gonna have to add this as a part of my 500 movies in 2025 series. I'm gonna have to go on my channel and talk about it. But this is the first and last time. I'm not watching this movie ever again. Um, like I said, there's far better ways to spend your time. Whether you're a wrestling fan, you're a horror enthusiast, or just someone looking for a decent movie, avoid this like the plague. This is if you've never seen this before, keep it that way. This film is just um a WrestleMania level of disappointment. It's worthless. I'm sorry. Anybody that's involved in this film, especially the wrestlers, um, I'm sorry, guys. This is just this is a piece of shit. This movie sucks. But that is it. That is it for the reviews of these films for this week in the 500 movies in 2025 series. Um, I I really enjoyed doing this video for the most part until this last movie that I talked about. And I hope you guys, that are checking this out, whether it be, live on the stream, whether it be on the replay, on the channel on YouTube. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video for the most part as well. Hear me talk about some of these movies that I watched for this week, for Easter and WrestleMania weekend, both alike. Please drop me a comment below on what your favorite from all these movies are. Um, if you have seen the last movie I talked about, Pro Wrestlers versus Zombies, I would love, please drop me a comment and let me know what you thought about that movie. I would love to hear what your thought, especially if you're someone who liked the movie. I would love to read and hear your analysis of Pro Wrestlers versus Zombies. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. Um, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button to catch more videos from me like this one. And click that bell for any kind of future notifications as well. So with all that said, oh, wait. Before I get into that, remember, guys, WrestleMania Night 2 is tonight. So after the show ends, be sure to hop over to Dead Pit Radio on YouTube, where the WrestleManiacs, will be covering Night 2 of WrestleMania. We'll be giving our post-show reactions to all the matches, just different, other wrestling topics I'm sure we'll be talking about as well. If you haven't seen part 1 of that, of Night 1, check that out over on the Dead Pit channel right now. And WrestleMania Night 2 will be starting here in just a couple hours, guys. So with all that said, I'm Crater. This is Crater Mania, brother. And I love you guys. And have a good night.